We are counting down the 15 British sandwiches your nan used to make. Humble creations that filled lunchboxes, silenced hungry children, and stretched every loaf through the lean years of post-war Britain. From chip butties wrapped in newspaper to the stark simplicity of bread and dripping, each entry tells the story of a nation that made do, wasted nothing, and found comfort between two slices of white. Expect surprising fillings, forgotten pastes, and flavors that shaped working-class tables for generations. Which lost sandwich tops the list? Let us begin our countdown with number 15. Number 15. Chip butties anchored the Friday night ritual in terraces and council flats across the industrial north. The ritual was simple but sacred. A portion of chips, still steaming from the fryer, was tipped onto thick slices of white bread, slathered with butter that melted on contact, then pressed together until the soft crumb absorbed every trace of salt and vinegar. In the 1960s, fish and chip shops numbered over 30,000 across Britain, making the raw ingredients for a chip butty available on nearly every high street. Housewives stretched a family portion by tucking chips between bread, turning a shared supper into individual meals that kept small hands occupied and bellies full. The bread, always white, always sliced thick, acted as both plate and napkin, catching the grease before it reached school uniforms or work shirts. Oral histories from Sheffield and Manchester recall the Friday queue, children clutching coins wrapped in paper, the walk home with the warm parcel tucked under a coat. The chip butty was never fancy, never formal. It was eaten standing in the kitchen, sat on the back step, or passed through car windows on rainy evenings. For a generation raised on thrift, it was proof that the simplest ingredients could become something worth craving. Today, the chip butty survives mostly in cafes and nostalgic menus, but the homemade version, wrapped in newspaper, has all but vanished from the family table. Crisp sandwiches brought crunch and rebellion to the packed lunch, a creation born not from recipe books, but from the ingenuity of children left to assemble their own tea. By the mid-1970s, crisp consumption had soared, with the average Briton eating nearly 4 packets a week. According to industry surveys, mothers bought multi-packs of ready salted or cheese and onion, intending them as treats, only to find them crushed between slices of buttered bread by resourceful sons and daughters. The technique was debated in playgrounds and factory canteens alike. Some insisted on layering the crisps flat, preserving each one intact until the first bite. Others crushed them into shards, creating a filling that crackled and dissolved against the soft white crumb. Either way, the sound was unmistakable, a sharp crunch that echoed through quiet kitchens and school dining halls. Diaries and letters from the era reveal the quiet pride children took in their invention, a sandwich that required no cooking, no supervision, and no permission. Mothers tolerated it as harmless, fathers sometimes joined in, and grandparents shook their heads at the waste of good bread. The crisp sandwich never appeared in Ministry of Food pamphlets or Women's Institute guides. It was folk cuisine, passed between generations without instruction. Today, it remains a guilty pleasure for some, but the ritual of making one at home, crisps spilling across the counter, has faded into memory for most. Number 13. Banana sandwiches carried the taste of post-rationing abundance into kitchens still shaped by scarcity. When banana imports resumed in the late 1940s after years of wartime absence, the fruit became a symbol of returning normalcy. Mothers who remembered the queues outside greengrocers, sometimes stretching around the block for a single bunch, treated bananas with reverence. Sliced thin and pressed between buttered white bread, sometimes with a shake of sugar or a drizzle of condensed milk, the banana sandwich was both treat and thrift. It stretched one banana across 2 or 3 children, each slice a reminder that the lean years were finally easing. School lunchboxes in the 1950s and 1960s often held banana sandwiches wrapped in grease-proof paper, the fruit browning slightly by midday but still sweet enough to trade in the playground. The combination of soft bread, ripe banana, and salted butter divided opinion. Some children adored the sweetness, others scraped the filling aside, but few forgot the taste. Oral histories recall the excitement of Banana Day, the only time the fruit appeared in the house, and the careful rationing that followed. For a generation shaped by scarcity, the banana sandwich was more than a snack. It was evidence that the world was opening up again. Today, the sandwich survives mostly as a novelty, its meaning lost to those who never knew a Britain without bananas. Fish paste sandwiches lined lunchboxes and picnic baskets with their unmistakable tang, a filling that divided households as sharply as any main course. Shippums, the name most synonymous with paste, had been producing jars since the Victorian era, but it was in the post-war decades that fish paste reached its peak. By 1955, sales figures showed that 1 in 3 households kept a jar in the larder, ready for sandwiches, toast, or a quick tea when nothing else would do. The paste itself was a mystery to most children, a smooth pinkish spread that tasted of the sea and something else, something they could never quite name. Mothers spread it thin, knowing a single jar could last a week, while fathers sometimes demanded it thick, the way their own mothers had made it. The smell lingered on fingers and in lunchboxes, a telltale sign that marked out the fish paste child in any classroom. Advertising from the era promised convenience and economy, but for many families the appeal was simpler. Fish paste required no refrigeration, no preparation, and no waste. It was always there, waiting in the cupboard, insurance against an empty larder. Today, the jars still sit on supermarket shelves, but the ritual of spreading paste onto bread, the scraping of the last traces from the glass, has faded from everyday life. A memory preserved mostly in the stories of those who grew up with its salty tang. Number 11. Sandwich spread became the default filling for a generation of children who never questioned what went between their bread. Heinz and other brands offered jars of finely chopped vegetables suspended in a creamy, tangy dressing, a product designed for speed and convenience in kitchens where time was short and appetites were large. By the late 1960s, sandwich spread had become a staple of the weekly shop, its distinctive label as familiar as tomato ketchup or salad cream. Mothers praised its ease, spreading it straight from the jar with no need for slicing, dicing, or thought. Children accepted it as simply what sandwiches tasted like, the slightly sweet, slightly sharp flavor becoming the background note of packed lunches and picnic blankets. The spread required no refrigeration once opened, a boon in homes where fridge space was precious and leftovers competed for shelf room. School trip coaches and village fete trestle tables were piled high with sandwich spread sandwiches, each one identical, each one adequate if not exciting. Diaries from the era recall the monotony, sandwich spread again, but also the comfort of knowing what to expect. For many, the taste is inseparable from childhood summers, long car journeys, and the rustle of greaseproof paper. Today, sandwich spread survives in supermarkets, but its place in the family lunchbox has been taken by newer, glossier fillings. The generation that grew up on it remembers, even if their own children never will. Number 10. Luncheon meat sandwiches carried the stamp of post-war pragmatism into kitchens across Britain, a filling born from tins rather than butcher's blocks. By the early 1950s, luncheon meat had become a cupboard staple, its pink, spiced slabs sliced thick and pressed between bread for school lunches, factory breaks, and hurried suppers. The meat itself was a product of necessity, a way to stretch pork and other offcuts into something uniform, and long-lasting. Mothers bought tins by the half-dozen, stacking them beside corned beef and spam, insurance against the days when fresh meat was scarce or simply too dear. The taste was mild, salty, and faintly spiced, a flavor that children either accepted or endured, depending on what else was on offer. Advertising promised modern convenience, but for most families, luncheon meat was simply what filled the gap. Sandwiches were assembled quickly, the meat sliced straight from the tin, sometimes with a smear of mustard, or a leaf of lettuce if the occasion demanded. Oral histories recall the ritual of opening the tin, the satisfying squelch as the block slid free, and the neat pink slices that followed. For a generation raised on thrift, luncheon meat sandwiches were neither treat nor punishment. They were simply lunch, reliable and unromantic. Today the tins remain on shelves, but the sandwich has all but disappeared, replaced by fillings that promise freshness rather than endurance. Number 9. Spam sandwiches marked the intersection of American largesse and British necessity, a filling that sustained a nation long after the war that brought it had ended. By 1945, over 100 million cans of spam had crossed the Atlantic, feeding troops and civilians alike. In the years that followed, the pink processed meat became a kitchen staple, sliced thin and fried until the edges crisped, or eaten cold straight from the tin. Housewives learned to stretch a single can across several meals, and the spam sandwich became a fixture of the working week. The taste was distinctive, salty, and faintly sweet, a flavor that children either craved or dreaded, depending on how often it appeared. The Ministry of Food offered variations: spam fritters, spam salad, spam and pickle, but the sandwich remained the quickest and most common use. For some, spam sandwiches meant survival. For others, they meant monotony. Either way, the memory lingers, tied to the scrape of the knife and the soft give of wartime bread. Today, spam survives as a curiosity, its sandwiches a rarity in a Britain that has long since moved on from the necessity that made them commonplace. Pilchard sandwiches brought the briny tang of tinned fish into lunchboxes and picnic baskets across post-war Britain. By the 1950s, Pilchards in tomato sauce had become a cupboard staple, their tins stacked beside sardines and mackerel in kitchens where fresh fish was a luxury reserved for Fridays. The ritual was simple, but messy. Mothers forked the soft fish onto bread, mashing the flesh with the back of a spoon until it spread evenly, the tomato sauce soaking into the crumb and staining fingers orange. Children approached Pilchard sandwiches with caution because the bones, though soft, demanded careful chewing and caused occasional grimaces. The smell was unmistakable, a sharp, oily scent that announced itself the moment the lunchbox opened, marking out the Pilchard child in any classroom. Nutritionists of the era praised tinned fish as an affordable source of protein and vitamins, and Ministry of Food pamphlets encouraged families to make the most of what the sea could provide. For many, the Pilchard sandwich was a weekly fixture, eaten quickly and without complaint, fuel for the afternoon ahead. Oral histories recall the arguments over who would finish the tin, the careful scraping of the last traces of sauce, and the bread that never quite lost its fishy tinge. Today, tinned Pilchards remain on supermarket shelves, but the sandwich has faded from common use, a memory of thrift and necessity rather than a choice. Number 7. Potted meat sandwiches carried the tradition of the Victorian larder into the 20th century, a filling that spoke of preservation, thrift, and the slow disappearance of old ways. Potted beef and potted ham, sealed under a layer of clarified butter, had once been the preserve of country houses and well-stocked pantries. By the post-war years, commercial versions filled grocers' shelves, offering a taste of the past at a price ordinary families could afford. The meat was dense and intensely flavored, spreadable but rich, a little going a long way on thick slices of bread. Mothers used it sparingly, knowing a single jar could stretch across several lunches, the buttercap scraped clean, and the last traces of meat chased with a knife. The taste was old-fashioned even then, a reminder of an era before refrigeration, when preservation was survival and nothing could be wasted. Children accepted potted meat sandwiches as simply part of the rotation, neither loved nor hated, but always present. Oral histories recall the distinctive jars, the scrape of the knife, and the rich, meaty smell that rose when the seal was broken. For many, potted meat was the taste of grandparents' kitchens, a link to a world that was already fading. Today, the sandwiches have all but vanished, the jars themselves a rarity, their memory preserved in stories rather than lunch boxes. Number 6. Salad cream sandwiches captured the peculiar tastes of mid-century Britain, a filling that baffled outsiders but delighted those who grew up with it. Heinz salad cream, tangy, sweet, and unapologetically synthetic, had become a kitchen staple by the 1960s, its distinctive bottle as familiar as ketchup or brown sauce. Mothers spread it thick on white bread, sometimes alone, sometimes with a leaf of limp lettuce or a slice of tomato, creating sandwiches that were eaten without ceremony at kitchen tables and on factory benches. The taste was sharp and creamy, a flavor that divided families and defined a generation. Children who loved it demanded more, and those who did not learned to scrape it aside. Advertising promised versatility, but for many households the salad cream sandwich was an end in itself, a quick meal when the larder was bare or time was short. Oral histories recall the ritual of shaking the bottle, the first pale splurt onto bread, and the tang that lingered long after the last bite. For some, salad cream sandwiches are the taste of childhood, inseparable from summer afternoons and the rustle of greaseproof paper. Today the bottles remain, but the sandwich has faded, replaced by fillings that promise sophistication rather than nostalgia. What once was ordinary has become a curiosity, remembered by those who never thought to question it. Number 5. Tongue sandwiches divided the British table with their boldness, a filling that required both nerve and tradition. By the 1950s, ox tongue had become a fixture of cold meat counters, pressed and sliced, its distinctive marbled pink a familiar sight in delicatessens and butchers' shops. Housewives bought it by the quarter pound, layering thin slices onto bread with a smear of mustard or a shake of white pepper. The taste was rich and gamey, a flavor that children either acquired or avoided depending on whether they dared to ask what they were eating. Tongue sandwiches appeared at funerals, christenings, and Sunday teas, their presence a mark of occasion and respectability. The meat itself required hours of preparation, boiled, skinned, and pressed before it could be sliced. But the commercial versions made the process unnecessary for most. Oral histories recall the ritual of the tongue sandwich, the careful arrangement on plates, and the murmured appreciation of older relatives who remembered when such things were commonplace. For many, tongue was simply what adults ate, a taste to be grown into rather than enjoyed. Today, tongue has all but vanished from British tables. Its sandwiches a memory preserved in the stories of those who watched their grandparents assemble them with quiet pride. Brawn sandwiches tested the limits of thrift and appetite, a filling that modern palates would scarcely recognize. Brawn, also known as head cheese, was made from the boiled head of a pig. The meat was picked clean and set in its own jelly, then sliced for sandwiches that appeared on working-class tables across the industrial North and Midlands. By the 1950s, brawn remained a butcher's staple, its mottled slabs displayed alongside pork pies and black pudding. Mothers bought it cheap, knowing a little went a long way, and pressed slices onto bread with a pinch of salt or a splash of vinegar. The taste was rich and gelatinous, a texture that children either accepted or refused, depending on how much they had been told. Oral histories recall the sight of Brawn on the counter, the wobble of the jelly, and the debates over which part was best. For many, Brawn sandwiches were a mark of hard times and harder tastes, a reminder that nothing from the animal could be wasted. Advertising was rare, reputation spread by word of mouth and the memories of those who had grown up with it. Today, Brawn survives only in specialist shops and regional markets, its sandwiches a relic of an era when economy trumped squeamishness. What once filled lunchboxes and picnic baskets has become a curiosity, remembered by the few who tasted it and forgotten by the rest. Number 3. Sugar sandwiches stood as the starkest symbol of childhood want, a filling that required nothing but bread, butter, and a handful of white crystals. In homes where the weekly budget stretched thin, mothers spread soft margarine on sliced white bread and shook sugar across the surface, folding the bread and pressing it flat before handing it to waiting children. It was a rush of sweetness that quieted hunger, even if it did not fully satisfy it. By the 1950s, sugar had become plentiful again after years of rationing. But the habit of the sugar sandwich lingered, a treat for children and a stopgap for parents with empty larders. Diaries from the era recall the ritual. Sugar sandwiches for tea, and children said nothing. School playgrounds knew the sugar sandwich child, the one whose lunchbox held no meat, no cheese, just bread and sweetness. For some, it was a secret shame. For others, simply the way things were. Oral histories speak of the crunch of undissolved sugar against teeth, the way the crystals caught the light, and the silence that followed the last bite. The sugar sandwich required no skill, no time, and almost no money. It was survival dressed as a treat, a meal that filled the gap between paydays. Today, it exists only in memory, a reminder of how little was needed to quiet a hungry child and how much that silence cost. Number 2. Condensed milk sandwiches brought illicit sweetness to kitchens shaped by rationing and restraint. The tins with their distinctive blue and white labels arrived during the war as a substitute for fresh milk, but their thick, syrupy contents soon became a treat in their own right. Mothers spread the golden paste onto bread, sometimes with a shake of cocoa powder or a few drops of vanilla, creating sandwiches that children devoured in secret and craved in public. By the 1950s, condensed milk had become a pantry staple, its sweetness stretching across desserts, teas, and the illicit sandwiches that disappeared before supper. The taste was intense and cloying, a flavor that coated the tongue and lingered long after the bread was gone. Oral histories recall the ritual of piercing the tin, the slow pour onto waiting bread, and the arguments over who had taken more than their share. For many, the condensed milk sandwich was the closest thing to pudding on an ordinary day, a reward for finishing chores or a bribe for silence. Adults tolerated it as harmless, children treasured it as rebellion. Today, condensed milk remains on supermarket shelves, but the sandwich has faded from common memory, its sweetness preserved only in the stories of those who grew up scraping the last traces from the tin. Number 1. Dripping sandwiches crowned the hierarchy of post-war thrift, a filling born from the Sunday roast and stretched across the working week. In kitchens where every shilling counted, the fat rendered from beef or pork was cooled in basins, its pale surface setting above a layer of rich, meaty jelly. Mothers spread the dripping thick on doorstep slices of white bread, seasoning with a pinch of salt or a scrape from the jellied bottom where the flavor ran deepest. The dripping sandwich was miner's fuel, factory lunch, and schoolchild's tea, eaten standing at the back door or wrapped in paper for the shift ahead. By the early 1950s, the National Food Survey recorded that 4 loaves per person per week passed through British households, much of it destined for dripping and little else. The taste was rich and savory, the fat melting against warm bread, the jelly adding depth that no butter could match. Oral histories recall the reverence with which the dripping basin was treated, the careful rationing that made it last, and the disappointment when the last scrape was gone. For a generation raised on scarcity, the dripping sandwich was more than sustenance. It was ritual and memory, and proof that even the leanest times could yield something worth eating. Children fought for the crusty edges, fathers took the heel, and mothers made do with what remained. Today, dripping sandwiches have vanished almost entirely from British tables, their memory tied to stories of coal fires, cold mornings, and the quiet dignity of making something from nothing. What once was ordinary has become unthinkable, a taste lost to a nation that no longer remembers what it meant to be truly hungry. Across all 15 entries, from the familiar comfort of the chip butty to the stark simplicity of the dripping sandwich at the very top, these forgotten British sandwiches tell a powerful story of survival, thrift, and ingenuity. Some, like Brawn and tongue, stand out as the most challenging reminders of what necessity once demanded, while others, such as sugar sandwiches and condensed milk, reveal how sweetness could be conjured from almost nothing. The common thread throughout is resourcefulness, stretching every loaf, wasting nothing, and turning scarcity into tradition. White bread, tinned meat, and rendered fat recur in nearly every entry, underscoring how necessity shaped the nation's packed lunches and tea-time tables. This ranking is not just about what disappeared from our lunchboxes, but what these sandwiches represent: the resilience of working-class families and the deep cultural memory pressed between 2 slices of bread. In the end, these 15 lost sandwiches are more than fillings. They are the taste of a generation that endured, adapted, and against the odds found moments of comfort wrapped in grease-proof paper and carried to school gates, factory floors, and kitchen tables across Britain.